These two little impact wrenches are no strangers to our channel. We've got the DCF 901 DeWalt on the left, and we have the Milwaukee 2555, or better known as the M12 Fuel Stubby impact wrench. And we put these two head to head in a previous video, which will include that video link here, so you can check that out. So be sure to do that, which, by the way, in one of those videos, they also kind of beat up on the 18-volt snap-on impact wrench, this guy here, which was kind of sad because it was a pretty unfair fight, and the one that brought the biggest tool lost by quite a bad gap. Let's just say that these two impact wrenches took this impact wrench to Gapplebee's. Yep, I said that. Anyway, so we have the Milwaukee, we have the DeWalt. These are their, stubby or small impact wrenches. They're both half-inch drive impact wrenches. Phenomenal power makers for the size that they are. They're overperformers, both of these tools. Giving you the spoiler if you haven't seen that video, but they finished neck and neck, these two tools. So that's not what we're going to do today. We're not going to put these head-to-head per se in an impact wrench fight where we're looking to see which one's the strongest. We already know that. But what we're going to do is see how they make their power and to see what's different between the two of them. Now, if you look at them right now, it looks like that the DeWalt is a little bit smaller than the Milwaukee. However, it's dressed in its 3 amp hour battery. If we throw the 5 amp hour on there, which is what it made its best power with, then it's it edges out a little bit taller than the Milwaukee, but still, they're still both small tools, even with their larger batteries on them. Now let's first get a weight on these two, just to kind of see what kind of difference we're dealing with in weight. And we'll zero that out, and pounds and ounces with the DeWalt, 3 pounds, 3.5 ounces, and with the Milwaukee, 3 pounds. So 3.5 ounce difference, pretty much spot on. And if we put the 6.0 battery on it, maybe we would go up, probably not. But anyway, very close, within a couple of ounces between the two tools. And if you look at the height of these two tools, right at 9 inches for the Milwaukee and right at 9.5 inches for the DeWalt. Again, depends on which battery that you're dressing it out in, but still you're looking at about a 9-inch tall tool. And then front to back, 4.25 inches on the Milwaukee and 4.5 inches on the DeWalt. Now, something else to mention is that the Stubby here, the Milwaukee Stubby, it's been out for I think like 4 years now. So pretty impressive that this tool kind of set the standard when it came to micro-sized impact wrenches when it started driving all that power. And by the way, if you go with a standard 2.0 battery, you're not going to see much of the power that this thing's able to produce when you step up to a 4.0 or 6.0 battery. When you look at the DeWalt, it is just basically a finger pull as far as power goes. That's your adjustability or variability, is the variable speed trigger, and that's going to allow you to vary that between 0 and 2800 RPM. Other than that, there's no other power modes on here where you could select different power, just a directional lever forward and back. Now with the Milwaukee Stubby, we have the variable speed trigger, but we also have a 4-mode drive control. In other words, we get 3 different power modes. So 1, 2, and 3 is going to vary the power. And that's going to grow for each step from 1. And we can tell just by RPM in 1. That's wide open. And 2. And 3 is where we're going to get our max RPM at just 2100. So 2800 on the DeWalt, 2100 on the Milwaukee. And then the 4th drive control here is kind of an automatic setting where it senses when something is broken free and then stops the tool, and then when you're tightening it, it doesn't over tighten it either. So running lugs on things like that, it won't over tighten it. You can come back with your torque wrench and tighten that up, or maybe even putting on head bolts, something like that. Get an LED light here on the front of the tool, whereas on the DeWalt, we get that tri-LED format that we're seeing on all the newer impact wrenches and impact drivers. We really wanted to see Milwaukee update this tool when we were there in June when they released a lot of automotive stuff. We didn't see it, so man, I hope they soon update this little Stubby, because it's been out for going on 4.5 years now. Now, as for ratings, DeWalt rates this at 250 foot-pounds of fastening torque and 400 foot-pounds of breakaway torque. And Milwaukee rates this at 250. So 250 fastening and 250 breakaway. That was way underrated on the breakaway, especially stepping up to a 4.0 or 6.0 battery. Both of these tools were capable of 500 foot-pounds or right at 500 foot-pounds. So they're way outdoing their marketing claims on the breakaway torque. But again, they're doing it in different format because we got 2,800 RPM here. We've got 2,100 RPM here. So we want to take these apart and see how are we getting the same amount of power when the RPM are so much different. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to remove the batteries here, and we're going to take these things apart. And once we get started, we'll go ahead and time-lapse this so we can run through it real quick. And unless we hit any snags or anything taking these apart, we're going to jump to having them apart with some quick, probably 800% or maybe 8 times speed. So we've got them apart, and if you look at the electronics, it does seem that obviously DeWalt is a newer product. This released, I believe, not even a year ago. So you see some waterproofing here with the coating there in the switch and chipboard or in the circuitry there. So you get a lot of protection there. Decent sized wiring coming from the batteries or coming from the battery, and then our brushless motor is up here. It's not like I can count the windings or anything on this motor, and I don't know if that's a motor that they use in other things as well. But a decent looking electrical system there, and then this is basically the housing. We'll take this apart here in one moment. Now the Stubby, again, this is an older impact wrench. This is one of the first really small impact wrenches that developed a lot of power, and you can see here that the electronics are just kind of open to the elements, if you will. No coatings on that, which has not had a problem with us running it like crazy, but just wanted to point that out. And then you can see the brushless motor. Here's the basically the rotating part of that, and then your windings and everything else are right here. Makes it nice and modular to be able to remove that and take a look. Now let's open up the front side where we're actually seeing the mechanism for driving and impacting. You see in here is just a bushing. There is no bearing in there, just a bushing that both kind of a forward-facing bushing, that flat part there, as well as the internal bushing right here where this rides around, which by the way looks like there's an O-ring right there. Keep the grease from coming out. So that rides on the bushing, as well as the face of these dogs here ride on the face of that bushing as well. And so this is what we call dogs right here, and that's basically what collides with this impacting mechanism. I've also got a video on how an impact works and explains this a little better, but I'll quickly explain it. Pull this out. We've got a spring here, and this is a heavy weight that hammers on this 1/2-inch anvil here. And so these dogs collide inside of that mechanism. So the brushless motor spins this, hits this, and if it can't drive the fastener to remove it or tighten it, then what it does, it compresses that spring, and so it basically jumps over those dogs and hits the next one and then hits again. So when you hear that bap, 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 that's what's happening. It's hitting and jumping over, hitting and jumping over. But really this anvil's not moving. This spring is compressing, and then it's jumping over like that and then hitting once more. So that's what's happening there. And we'll get a weight on these things. And by the way, these are planetary gears here. And there's only 2 planetaries here on their larger impact wrenches. They're using either 3 or 4. And you see there's a ring gear here. And so what happens, what that does is that basically reduces the RPM. So even though that electric motor could be spinning at 5,000 RPM, as this spins, those two gears are reducing the RPM from that small gear there to these larger gears here that's then riding against this large gear, which majorly slows down the RPM from whatever the engine's spinning to the max 2100 RPM, and then actually impacting at the anvil. And now let's see if the DeWalt will come apart the same way. Yeah, it looks like it. Again, same type of bushing. That looks to be either Teflon or nylon, and looks to be maybe a brass bushing here on the internal. Same idea. It's riding against a bushing on the face as well as a bushing there on the internal diameter as well. There's the dogs, a little bit different shape of dogs, but still the same idea. Hits, jumps over, compresses that spring, jumps over, and then hits the dogs one more time. Again, more of a squared off effect rather than kind of the teardropped oval shape. But there's our spring down there. And then let's see if we can see the planetaries here. Yep, there we go. And look at the DeWalt. So they're using a 3-gear planetary. I like that. That's a nice upgrade from a 2. It just gives you more stability in the tool itself. Again, not that we've had any issues with the Stubby, but those are things you could definitely improve on as you upgrade your models in your impact wrenches. So love to see that 3-geared planetary, and then we have a nice big bearing there. But same concept is we have this smaller gear right here coming directly off that brushless motor, just like on the Milwaukee, that is driving those planetaries, that's then slowing down the RPM, which not only is it slowing it down, it's building torque basically. So using a gear drive, just like in your transmission in your car, in low gear you have much more torque to get that vehicle up to speed than you do in high gear or in overdrive. Same concept here. You're using these planetaries, which your transmission is full of, to reduce the RPM and increase the torque. Now here's what's interesting here. I assumed I was going to take this apart and I was going to find a much heavier system in the Milwaukee, because it seems to hit harder when you actually feel an impact, and it has much less RPM than the DeWalt. So I figured DeWalt was using a lighter impacting mechanism to drive it faster to build the same amount of torque as with the Milwaukee, with a heavier and slower. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like the DeWalt's going to be much heavier, but let's find out. Now all I'm going to measure is the rotating masses, or the rotating components of this. So I'm going to use planetaries and all. So you're looking at 9, or let's go to grams. Should measure that a little more precise. So 270 grams. And here, 295 grams. So again, heavier on the DeWalt, but even though it's driving it faster and heavier, it didn't build more power. I'm kind of surprised by that. So 295, so you're looking at 25 grams heavier on the DeWalt. Let's now measure the anvil. 60 grams versus 55 grams. So overall, you're looking at 30 grams heavier on the DeWalt. Yeah, 270 here, 295 here, so 25 plus the 5 in the anvil. So you're looking at 30 grams heavier. So I'm kind of confused now. I really thought we would see that the DeWalt was going to be lighter, but we've got a heavier anvil and a heavier rotating mass and a higher RPM motor versus Milwaukee. So the only thing I could say is that the brushless motor in the Milwaukee is just naturally building more torque than on the DeWalt. It just doesn't make sense. I figure with higher speed, more mass, we would see more power out of the DeWalt, because these things, like I said, finished head to head. Now while we have these apart, I was going to go ahead and lube these things up. I'm really not going to clean them out. I'm just going to, they don't seem to be very dirty. If there were some nasty grease in there or some dirt in there, I might clean up all that stuff, but I'm not going to worry about it. Definitely going to lube up the face, that bushing on the front, and I'll put a little on the inside of that one too. We'll wipe this down after we get it back together. And don't forget this little metal clip here that adds additional strength here where the body is put together. Oh, much smoother. Now let's see if we can get the DeWalt back together. Moment of truth. Well, that's pretty much it for this one. Not a lot to wrap up other than pricing. I think you can get the Stubby by itself for $199 and the DCF 901 by itself for $149. But when you look at kit prices, I think you can get this kit with 2 batteries, the 2 amp hour and a 4 amp hour, and a charger for like $329, and I think the DeWalt you can get for somewhere around $300. So they're pretty much even. I guess if you looked at bare bones price, the DeWalt's going to be cheaper. Then you got to make sure you got the batteries. The same with the Milwaukee. But both of these are overachievers, and I just really wanted to dig in and find out why they made equal power, but one had a lot more RPM, and I still didn't get to the bottom of it, other than I have to assume that the brushless motor on the Milwaukee, that's still 4 years older, at least 3.5 years older than the DeWalt, still building more torque. But regardless, both these tools are pretty amazing. Love the red and tacky grease, by the way, when I'm greasing up stuff. It gives it a nice smooth finish and feel when they're done, so that'll help out. And the longevity. By the way, do you love my assembly and disassembly tool? This tool they do not make anymore. This is the rigid palm impact driver. Model number was the R8224. I would love it if Milwaukee or DeWalt or even Snap-on back there would make one of these. Just a very handy tool for doing assembly and disassembly like I was doing. So love this tool, but they don't make it anymore, and I hate that. And by the way, you know, don't feel sorry for the Snap-on back there. That's an expensive expensive tool. And like I said, the Milwaukee and the DeWalt has beat up on that one. Poor little guy. So that's why it still looks brand new back there, because it just doesn't get used much because it's just a weakling. Anyway, that's it. Have a great one. Keep smiling.